Welcome to Boring History Bedtime Stories, where I bring you tales from the past that are so fascinating they'll make you wish you had paid more attention in school. Today we were following a grain ledger clerk around for a day in the life in 2nd century Rome. It's actually against building codes to keep livestock on your roof, but this is Rome and everybody does it anyway. Now Publius has gotten drunk the night before and is hungover. He hands over the grain ledger for the month and tells Quintus to balance the books while he goes back to sleep. The previous entry in the ledger shows that 87,000 bushels of grain were stored in the temple's granary, but the current count shows only 84,000 bushels. When you come back, Quintus is having lunch with his sons. Titus knows the farmer whose name appears on the forged receipt for the grain, and he agreed to go there with Quintus to verify the numbers on the receipt. The farmer claims that he sold Marcus 10,000 bushels of grain. They're eating leftover stew from yesterday's dinner, along with bread that's so stale it's almost as hard as stone, but that he's ordered to repay the grain with interest. The school is small and hot and stinks of stale urine. The boys study grammar, rhetoric, poetry, music, and arithmetic. But there isn't much time left for physical exercise or creative pursuits like sculpture or painting. Most of the kids here are poor and some are enslaved. They're learning so that they can get better jobs and improve their station in life. For some, this may mean becoming an accountant, a trade that is open to freedmen and women, though usually starting at the bottom of the pile. Unfortunately, this means that Marcus will never be able to earn enough to buy his family's freedom now. Quintus feels sorry for the guy and quietly forgives his debt. The boys will probably take this to school with them tomorrow to eat for breakfast. Their mother, Amelia, brought them figs, which are their favorite treat. His oldest boy has returned from the countryside after visiting his maternal grandparents. Life on a farm was hard, he says, and the work was backbreaking. Quintus is glad to be living in the city. He's glad to be a lowly accountant and not a farmer. Figs are expensive, though, and their father warns them not to waste them. If you enjoyed this tale of fiscal responsibility and the evils of slavery, then check out the series link below. There's something for everyone. Now, when you're running a business as big as a Roman temple, there are bound to be some discrepancies between what the records say and what the reality is on the ground. Maybe some grain got stolen or spilled or is infested with weevil. It's not a big deal. It happens. While his animals graze, Quintus is eating breakfast with his family. His wife, Amelia, is still asleep, so he wakes her up gently. "Awake, my love," he says, and end this charade of slumber. The sacred Lupercal requires our firstborn son as a sacrifice. No, just kidding. He doesn't say that at all. Instead, he says, "Awake, my love, and let us share this breakfast of stale bread and goat's milk. Work awaits." Quintus and Amelia exchange greetings with their 2 adult sons, one of whom is called Quintus too. They don't bother waking up their daughters. Girls aren't really expected to do much in the way of housework until they're married. In fact, there was nothing really all that exciting about daily life in the city unless you were some hotshot senator or gladiator or, the emperor. The elder Quintus is an accountant for the Temple of Juno, one of many state temples in Rome, whose role it was to receive offerings from pilgrims and travelers, and then use that money to maintain the building and fund festivals. Most of the money comes from fines levied against those who break the law, like the 300 denarii Quintus is expecting today. That's the equivalent of maybe a few $1,000. Not bad for a single day's work. He also deals with accounting for grain stores that the temple uses to feed the poor. But even the emperor spends a lot of his days doing paperwork too, because empire building is a lot of work, So today, we're going to tone things down a bit and follow a regular guy named Quintus doing a regular job. It's 6 o'clock in the morning, and Quintus has already been awake for an hour, tending to a small flock of sheep and goats that he keeps on the roof of his apartment building. Now, after breakfast, it's off to work. Arriving at the temple, he finds that his boss, the treasurer Publius, is waiting for him. So Quintus gets to work poring over receipts and invoices and other documents to try to figure out where the missing grain went. He calls in Lucius, the night watchman, who swears up and down that he didn't steal any grain. If he did, he would never admit it though, so that's not exactly reliable testimony. Next, Quintus brings in Marcus, the slave who unloads the grain from the carts and into the storehouse. Marcus claims that he unloaded 87,000 bushels, but Quintus points out that this is clearly a forgery, since that would mean that Marcus is 67 years old. Checking the register of slaves, Quintus finds that Marcus is only 40, but that he has been at the temple for 27 years. Apparently, he was purchased as a young boy and trained to read and write so that he could help manage the grain stores. This was not unusual. Many rich Romans enslaved children so that they could learn alongside them. After all, education was expensive and you got what you paid for. In the afternoon, Quintus finishes reconciling the accounts and Publius wakes up from his nap. "Good news, boss," says Quintus. "I found what happened to the missing grain." He explains that Marcus switched the account books, recording 87,000 bushels when really only 84,000 had been delivered. But why? Well, the answer is pretty simple. Marcus wants to buy his freedom. Marcus explains to Quintus that he has saved up enough money working at the temple to purchase his freedom and that of his family, who are also enslaved. But he can't do that without faking a delivery of grain. You see, it's not possible to sell grain from the temple granary. It's dedicated to the goddess Juno, and so the grain inside belongs to her. What Marcus needed to do was to record a delivery of grain that wasn't there, take some of the grain from another granary where it wasn't missed, and then sell that grain to someone who would buy grain from wherever. So Marcus had to forge the receipts, then sell the grain and plant false evidence that he had bought the grain from a specific farm in the fields of Atina. This is getting complicated, so let's take a quick break. After lunch, Quintus goes to the marketplace to meet a merchant named Titus. That evening, Quintus is summoned to the office of a senator, Gaius Cassius Longinus, who sits on the board of the Temple of Juno's finances. He's angry about the missing grain, and he's angry that the treasurer didn't tell him about this sooner. Quintus tries to explain that Publius was drunk and couldn't speak, but the senator cuts him off. "Silence, you insolent dog. Do you think me a fool?" Then, turning to Titus, the senator asks, "And you, merchant, what profit do you make selling grain to Marcus, a slave who could not possibly own any grain?" Titus explains that Marcus told him that he planned to sell the grain and use the money to buy his freedom, but that he would return the favor by buying grain from the merchant at a premium once he was free. So the senator asks, "Do you believe Marcus?" And Titus says, "Would I lie to the Senate?" The senator leaves and returns with Publius, who apologizes profusely for not telling him about the missing grain sooner. He's worried that he'll lose his cushy sinecure. After all, he's related to the emperor by marriage, but not by blood. Being related to the emperor is a huge leg up when it comes to getting jobs. Basically, nepotism was institutionalized in the Roman Empire. The next morning, Quintus is back in his office. The senator has informed him that Marcus is to be given a noble Roman name and freed. On the way home, Quintus stops by the school where his younger son attends. It's run by a former slave who has gone blind. Back at home, Quintus eats dinner with his family. And that's the end of another exciting episode of Boring History Bedtime Stories.